Who is truly standing in the way of a peaceful outcome for this process? In this program, we're going to discuss the circumstances and what really happened behind the scenes. At first glance, this would appear to be a simple relocation, but in reality, it proved to be a complicated issue. A range of difficulties and obstacles have complicated the relocation of Camp Ashraf to a desolate camp in Baghdad, known as Camp Liberty. Let's take a closer look at some of these difficulties and obstacles. Contrary to what the al-Maliki administration is trying to present, the eviction of these dissidents from their home and their relocation to a prison called Liberty is not in line with the Iraqi people's wishes. If it is not an Iraqi wish, then who supports efforts to evacuate Ashraf and cram its residents into Liberty? It's clear that ever since security of Ashraf was transferred from US forces to the Iraqis in 2009, which at the time aroused stern opposition from the residents themselves, who were concerned about the dangerous prospects of such a move, the Iranian regime has consistently been looking to dislodge the residents from their camp. After popular uprisings in Iran in 2009, the Arab Spring, and now the Syrian Revolution, which has pushed the mullah's main regional ally, Bashar al-Assad, to the brink of a collapse, this need is more urgent than ever.
ایشان خطاب به رئیس جمهور عراق خاطر نشان کردند انتظار این است که جناب عالی و جناب آقای مالکی نخست وزیر عراق به صورت جدی عملی شدن توافقها و تفاهمهای دو جانبه را پیگیری نمایید. رهبر انقلاب اسلامی به توافق دو جانبه در خصوص اخراج منافقین از عراق اشاره و تاکید کردند این تصمیم باید عملی شود و ما منتظر تحقق آن هستیم.
What transpired in Ashraf since 2009 is a clear indication of Iraq's true intentions in evicting the residents. Since then, 2 massacres have been perpetrated by Iraqi security forces, an inhumane siege has been imposed on the residents, and many deadlines have been set by the government for closure of the camp. UNHCR was ready and could have begun its process to reconfirm the residents' refugee status late last year in Ashraf, and its officials had even visited different venues in Ashraf and had selected a neutral and secure site where the interviews could be carried out. But as outlined in many statements issued by UNHCR, the government of Iraq was against this and had insisted that the residents must leave Ashraf before the registration process began. Ashraf is undoubtedly the most suitable and, from a financial point of view, the most appropriate site for all parties involved. But the Maliki administration stood in the way to start the process. At the time, even Secretary Clinton had said during a February 29 hearing before the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, and in response to Representative Ted Poe's concerns over Liberty, I would have preferred having them processed at Ashraf. That turned out to be impractical for a lot of reasons. At this point, one question strikes the mind. Why was Ashraf evacuated, and why couldn't the UNHCR begin its work in Ashraf?
I have been against the shutting down of Camp Ashraf. I've been against taking that population and putting them anywhere else. There's supposed to be a resettlement program in place. We have seen no such resettlement. No one is in another country.
On May 2012, the residents had accepted the European Parliament plan, agreeing to leave Iraq and resettle in third countries. As a result, there was never a need for evacuation of Ashraf and for them to be relocated within Iraq. Efforts to drive them out of their home and have them relocated to a prison could have only pleased the Iranian regime and their wishes that their main opposition force be dismantled.
I mean, I have been to Guantanamo Bay Prison. I used to be a judge in Texas. I've been to prisons all over the world. Let me tell you, the conditions in Camp Liberty that we allow to exist are worse than any prison I have ever seen.
And they still live in this concentration camp, and at this moment, the reason they are there is because not only should they not have been transferred, but in order just to move on to another country, we would just need to take the people of Camp Ashraf off the terrorist designation.
Finally, on February 18, 2012, the first group of residents agreed to relocate to Camp Liberty as a show of goodwill. During this process, the residents were harassed and exposed to a great deal of pressure by Iraqi security forces. They had agreed to go to Liberty after assurances and guarantees for their security, safety, and well-being were provided by the US and the UN, and only after Mrs. Rajavi had advised them to do so. On January 30, 2012, Camp Liberty's substandard infrastructure were hurriedly approved by a shelter expert. Soon thereafter, UNHCR clarified, insisting that this particular expert had only been introduced as a consultant to the government of Iraq and assumed no responsibility for his assessment. Before the departure of the first convoy, the residents had numerously requested that Liberty's infrastructure be examined by technicians from Ashraf. Neither Martin Kobler nor the government of Iraq ever agreed with this request, nor did they allow other individuals from the European Parliament or the US who were concerned about the situation in Liberty to go ahead and access circumstances at Camp Liberty.
Before I was the mayor, I was a prosecutor. I'm a suspicious human being. This can't be for a good reason. This can't be because Maliki has the best interests of the people of Ashraf in his heart and mind. So, I don't know why this is being done at all. But if it is being done, then why is it that the Iraqi government, our ally, will not allow us to inspect it? We've offered, many of us on this stage have offered to go there. We know prisons.
I know we're trying to deal with the Maliki government in a diplomatic way, but let me tell you what happened to me last year when I was with several other members of Congress and we went to see Mr. Maliki in Iraq. And while we were there visiting with him, we made this request. We would like to go see Camp Ashraf and see for ourselves the conditions. Because, you know, the world has heard everything, that it's from a concentration camp to a paradise. You know, I mean, the world has been told that by different folks. Let us go see, we'll make our own judgment. And Mr. Maliki was incensed. He was infuriated that we would even ask to go see Camp Ashraf, and his denial was emphatic. You will not go to Camp Ashraf.
But what were they concealing from the residents? Soon after the first group of residents, totaling 400 people, arrived in Liberty, it became clear that contrary to the statements by UN Special Representative Mr. Kobler, Liberty lacked adequate infrastructure. It lacked water and electricity supply and a proper sewage system.
To say that we deplore the situation that freedom-loving Iranians are suffering under in this terrible resettlement program from Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty. What a shame to use the word liberty in what is essentially a prison. It's the anti-liberty. This should be called Camp Anti-Liberty. In Camp Ashraf, there was a thriving community of freedom seekers whose one desire is to restore Iran to its glory.
Representations were made that were wrong. And we're not about to spend a lot of time accusing people, although somebody's got to figure out why they were made, and perhaps Professor Dershowitz's suggestion is correct. At some point in time, why did you say what you said when you knew it was wrong? But having said that, our appeal to them today, fix it. Take care of it now. And you know who'd be willing to do it for you? The residents of Camp Ashraf. Now, you made the decision to leave Camp Ashraf, and for the good Lord, I have no idea why, but if you're going to have them at Camp Liberty, look what they built at Camp Liberty. They can take care of themselves if you give them the tools to do it down there. Get out of their way, they'll fix it.
The residents had to haul their daily need of water from a location 12 kilometers away using tankers. Of course, this is extremely expensive. The camp's power grid has not been connected to the city grid. Power generators at the camp are worn out, many parts stolen. These generators are, nonetheless, the camp's only source of power supply, and only a few are currently operating at low output levels. Fuel costs for these generators reach millions of dollars, as the residents must purchase and deliver the fuel from abroad to operate the generators.
basic human necessities are ignored. Now, why is that? Well, in my opinion, it's because of the Maliki government. So the Maliki government has decided to put somebody in charge of Camp Liberty. I haven't met this guy, but his name is Colonel Kazin. You may have heard him. I'm going to call him Colonel Fox, because he's the fox guarding the hen house. And so Colonel Fox's background is interesting, because he was the colonel that ordered the massacre of 36 Camp Ashraf residents last April. Now, isn't that lovely? Putting the fox, Colonel Fox, in charge of the innocents in Camp Ashraf. And he is the one that is preventing basic necessities from coming in to Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty, I should say. Why would they put Colonel Fox in charge? Makes no sense to me unless they want to continue, the government wants to continue its persecution.
During his visit to Tehran, Martin Kobler discussed the issue of Camp Ashraf with Iranian officials. A few days later, Faleh Fayyaz al-Ameri, the national security advisor to Maliki, said in his interview with an Iraqi state-run TV station,
والسيد مارتن كوبلر ممثل الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة في العراق أيضا لديه بحث طويل مع الجانب العراقي ومع الجانب الإيراني من خلال السفارة الإيرانية ومن خلال وسائل أخرى للاتصال مع الجانب الإيراني لتوفير مستلزمات التفاهم الذي تم بينه وبين العراق من أجل إنهاء معسكر أشرف وإنهاء وجود المنظمة على الأرض العراقية خلال هذا العام. وما تطرق له البحث هو في حدود آلية والدور الإيراني في إنجاز ما يجب عليهم في حل هذه المشكلة.
SRSG never denied his discussions with ruling dictators in Iran on Ashraf dossier, which is an absolute red line for the residents.
Subsequent to these, the residents announced that if their minimum humanitarian demands are not addressed, no other convoy will leave Ashraf. In its report, the UN Work Group for Arbitrary Arrest says the conditions in Camp Liberty are synonymous with those in a detention center, as residents have no freedom of movement, nor interaction with the outside world, nor do they have freedom of movement and the semblance of a free life within the camp. The situation of the residents of Camp Liberty is tantamount to that of detainees or prisoners. Iraq's willingness to address the residents' basic demands will make it clear that it has no ulterior motives and that it merely wants to peacefully take the residents out of Ashraf and Iraq. Otherwise, no one should have any doubts about Iraq's intentions to serve Iran's wishes in dismantling the main Iranian opposition force, and in this context, the UN Special Representative is effectively facilitating this plot. Let's take a quick look at the simple demands which are so essential in providing the 3,400 residents with proper living conditions at Liberty, and why is Iraq refusing to address them. Adequate water for residents in Liberty. The transport of all power generators belonging to the residents of Ashraf to Liberty. The transport of 6 vehicles returned back to Ashraf from the 5th convoy. The transport of 5 forklifts from Ashraf to Liberty. The transport of 50 vehicles or equivalent number of buses for 2,000 residents, in addition to the 30 vehicles already transported to Liberty for 1,200 residents. Permit such construction work as construction of walkways, shades, special facilities for the disabled and gardens. Allow merchants and businessmen to enter Ashraf and purchase the residents' movable and immovable property. How could Iraq's sovereignty be undermined with such simple demands? Iraq's objective is to expose the residents to the maximum amount of physical and psychological pressure. It is perceived that under such pressure, the residents will eventually relent and return to Iran. The residents are now confronted with 2 options: either choose to go to a prison or risk losing their lives in Ashraf. If the U.S. State Department and Mr. Kobler are certain that the conditions at Camp Liberty are above acceptable, Why won't they allow reporters, politicians, and human rights activists so eager to visit the camps and talk with its residents into the camp to see everything for themselves?